Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and go over each of these questions. Some of them I'll go ahead and pretty much do with you. Some of them I'm just going to talk about what you need to do to answer them. This first one in the review is just find the ordered pair that's included in the solution set for the system. So basically what that means is you're looking for the point that is in the shaded region or on the solid line that is adjacent or touching the shaded region. So this is a system of inequalities. You can see that the dashed line is shaded above, the solid line is shaded below, so the solution set to the system is this shaded region here. Next question. Which graph best represents a system of equations that has no solution? So you're just looking for the graph that appears to have no solution. Now this one is a system of equations. What best represents the solution to this system of equations? You're looking for the ordered pair that represents the solution to this system of equations. This one, they give you one line on the grid that represents the first of two equations in a system of linear equations. The graph of the second equation of the system passes through these points. So what you're going to need to do is open up Desmos and put those points in a table, 0, -3, and 4, 3. And then do a linear regression, it's the easiest way at least, to find your slope and your y-intercept. So my slope is 1.5, my y-intercept is -3. And now I have the equation for the second line. Find 2 points off of this line and put those into Desmos. So I'm going to find 2 points. I see 2, 0 and 4, 3. 2, 0, 4, 3. We're going to do a linear regression on that table. Gives me a slope of 1.5 and a y-intercept of -3. Now, looking at this system of equations, answer the question below. What statement is true? One of these statements is a true statement. Find the true statement. This one asks, what is the solution to this system of equations? This first one, you can graph it as is. If I type in y equals, and then to make a fraction, you can either use parentheses or you can just type in frac, and it'll create a fraction for you here. And we can type in the top 16 minus 4x, and on the bottom I believe was a 5. It was a 3. And there is the first equation. For this one, you're going to have to isolate y. Go ahead and actually show you how to do that. 4x plus 2y equals 12. Why don't you try? Pause the video and try to see if you can isolate y on your own. Hopefully you paused the video and you tried it on your own. And the steps you did were minus 4x on both sides to isolate the 2y, and you're left with 2y equals 12 minus 4x. Then you saw that there's a 2 in front of the y that we need to cancel, so you divided both sides by 2, and you divided every term, and you got y equals 6 minus 2x. And now you could put that equation into Desmos and find your solution. The next one, this is a bit of a tricky one. What you'd have to do is you'd have to read these two situations. One, the total cost of a large ice cream cone from Marble Slab is $7.20 plus 60 cents for each mix-in. The total cost of a large ice cream cone from Cold Stone Creamery is $6 plus 90 cents for each mix-in. Create a system of equations. So you're going to take those two equations, identifying what number is the slope and what number is the y-intercept for each ice cream company, and then use the solution of that system of equations to answer the question. When a large ice cream cone from each ice cream shop has some number of mix-ins, the price of each cone is the same cost of, what is the same cost? I expect you should be able to figure out most of this on your own from here. So for this one, they give you two lines, and they're asking, which system of equations does this graph represent? So what I recommend you do is use these 2 points on each line and find the equation for each line. Maybe you can identify the y-intercept of one line and the y-intercept of the other line and start eliminating answer choices that way. But probably the easiest way, especially since they labeled these points for you, is to go ahead and put them in a table, do your linear regression, and from there, you'll have your slope and your y-intercept, and you can write the 2 equations. And that's all you have to do here, is just answer what equations, which system of equations match the 2 on the grid. This next one might be a bit tricky. I'm going to go ahead and actually do this one with you. So it says, what is the x value in the solution to the system of equations shown below? They give you a pretty weird equation here, and then a standard form equation. So I'm going to go ahead and write my 2 equations. X equals 2y plus 16.7. I think that was my first one. Perfect. And then 4x plus y equals 20. So the one on the right, that might be a little bit more familiar for converting into y equals form. Go ahead and try to do your best on your own. I generally recommend you do that for most of these. And you get y equals 20 minus 4x. So there's the first one, and we can go ahead and graph that. But this other one, that's in a bit more of a weird form. Remember that we're trying to isolate y. So put your finger or a pen or whatever on the variable you're trying to isolate. So we're trying to isolate this y here. So what I need to do is I need to remove everything from the side that y is on. So because I'm on the right side trying to isolate y, I don't need to move my x this time, even though that's commonly what we do. In this case, I actually want to remove this whole term that's being added to y, this 16.7. So because something's being added or subtracted with my y, I want to remove that first. I'm going to subtract 16.7 on both sides. And anytime you have a term adding or subtracting with the thing you're trying to isolate, always add or subtract to cancel it out. Don't divide until it's just your coefficient and variable all by themselves. So here I'm going to write it as x minus 16.7 equals 2y. And now what you need to do is cancel that coefficient of 2. So I'm going to divide both sides by 2. There's a couple ways you could do this. You could individually divide each number, and that's pretty helpful for actually seeing your slope and y-intercept. Or, if you really just want to save some time, I'll show you how you can do it an easier way in decimals. So we're going to divide this 1x by 2, and we're going to divide negative 16.5 by 2. And I get 1/2 x minus 8.35 equals y. And I can reverse it. It's the same thing. And now I have my 2 equations that I can put into decimals. And I'm going to go ahead and do that. And then you can see your 2 solutions. So, or my 1 ordered pair solution. So y equals 20 minus 4x was the first one. And actually, to show you that easier way, remember we had 2y equals x minus 16.7. When you divide both sides by y, you could highlight the entire right side and then do divided by 2. And even though it's not technically in slope-intercept form, it'll still graph it for you. So you can still find your solution on the grid. And then once you've found your solution, be careful what it's asking for. It's specifically asking for the value of x here. So make sure that that's what you answer. Just the value, just the number that x is equal to on the solution. Here, we have 2 equations. You need to find which graph matches these equations. So the way I'd recommend you do it, isolate y and find the 2 equations, or the 2 lines that match the 2 equations you get when you isolate y for both of these. I'm going to leave you to try to practice this one. Pretty similar problem. The only difference is we have inequalities, so we have shading. We only have shading when it's a system of inequalities. With this one, you're going to isolate y also, and you're going to find the 2 inequalities, or the system of inequalities, that matches the equations or inequalities you had here. So which graph matches these 2 when you solve them for y? Don't forget, if you divide by a negative, your sign is going to flip. This one's really tricky, so I'm pretty much going to do this one for you guys. Try to see if you can think about it. Spend a little bit of time thinking about it, because there's a lot of extra information that's kind of unnecessary. And if you can just think about what to do with the one key piece of information, you could probably solve this one on your own. But I'll admit, it is a bit tricky. So I am going to mostly do this one for you, unless you want to try to do it on your own. So let me full screen it, and in the meantime, you try to do it on your own. Okay. Build to Spill is having a concert, and there are 2 types of tickets being sold: adult tickets and youth tickets. The price of a youth ticket is 2/3 the price of an adult ticket. Below is some additional information about the ticket sales. There were 150 adult tickets sold. There were 75 youth tickets sold. The total amount of ticket sales from both types of tickets was $3,500. Below is a graph representing the possible costs of tickets given the total ticket sales. If the second equation in the system is y equals 2/3 x, then what is the best estimate of a youth ticket price? So maybe take a minute, pause the video, and see if you can think about what to do with this information, and maybe what information you don't need to really worry about. Okay, so actually, all this information has already been processed for you and turned into this graph. Essentially, they wrote a standard form equation that is concerned with this information here, and that's what this line is. So all this information, pretty much unnecessary, and has been put onto the graph, and because it's already been processed and put onto the graph, you don't have to worry about it anymore. What you do need to worry about is the second equation that's not graphed on this system. So it says the second equation is 2/3 of x. So let's try to graph that equation. So I know that y is going to be 2/3 of whatever x is. So if x is 3, y is going to be 2/3 of that. It's going to be about 2. I'm going to go ahead and just plot a point at 2 the best I can. Same thing here. I'm going to plot a point at 2/3 of 6, which is like 4. And we're going to continue this sort of pattern until I get to the intersection point. 2/3 of 12 is about 8. 2/3 of 15 is exactly 10. You can see my line isn't perfect. It's not about being perfect. It's about finding the best estimate. 2/3 of 18 is about 15. Wait, no, it's 12. My bad. And honestly, we've graphed enough points that we can see the line pretty clearly. So if I want to draw a pretty straight line through all these points, you can get a good idea of my possible ticket sales, or my possible costs of adult tickets versus youth tickets, given these 2 equations. And now I can see that at about maybe $17, something like that, and about $12 or something like that is my two costs of the tickets. And let's look at the answer choices. So I see, well, that's not super helpful. Let's just erase that. I've already identified my solution. I see 5, 8, 15, and 11.67 as my possible ticket prices. And that means that probably 11.67 is my ticket price because it most reasonably seems to match where my solution was at on the lines or on the system. So realistically, if you're ever seeing a question like this, just focus on this piece of information here because they've already given you half of the problem. They've graphed one of the lines for you, and now you have another line that you just need to graph. So try to graph it, try to estimate that graph as best you can. It's y equals 2/3, so your y is just 2/3 of whatever your x is, and that looks to be just about right. And it doesn't have to be perfect. You don't even necessarily need a line on the paper. You can kind of just estimate as you go up. That'd be the best way I recommend handling a question like this. It is tricky. It is very convoluted and confusing looking, but that's how I would process it. This next one, it says the tables represent some points on lines J and L. Use the tables to complete the statements. So they give you some equations saying the equation for line J is this one, the equation for line L is this one, and then the solution to the system is one of these options. You've got Desmos. Just use it. There's a lot of different ways you can do this by hand, and we've covered them all. But at this point, you're preparing for a test where your time is very limited. So put the points into Desmos. I noticed that this made a second table. So I'm going to go ahead and use y2 squiggle and x2 plus b to get my slope and y-intercept. Notice that if it's y2, I need to do y2. If it's x2, I need to do x2. If I just did y1 and x1 like normal, it's not going to work. It's not going to create the line. It's just going to give me random information. It makes up an x1. It makes up a y1. So there's no point in you not matching, you doing this if it's not going to match the table you created. And there, I pretty much gave you the answer if you're paying attention to this first one. And then the last question on the review, it's almost the same thing. They give you two lines. One is represented by a table. The other is represented by a graph, so there's a couple ways you could find the slope and y-intercept. But again, they also highlight some points for you. So maybe just identify those points and put them into Desmos to get the two equations that match the system of equations. All right, that's the whole review. I pretty much covered every question on it. Good luck on your test. You can all do very well.